If you were a fan of shoot-'em-ups or just playing cool helicopters and stuff, you likely played the Strike series of games for either the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis in the early 90s. In the shoot-'em-up style, similar to beat-'em-ups like Double Dragon or Ninja Turtles, you fire a weapon in multiple directions at the enemy. The Strike series took the concept further by merging shoot-'em-up with open-world gameplay along with mission objectives to give the game's final direction. The first game in the series, Desert Strike, copies and parallels the events of the Gulf War in the Middle East. Your objective is to stop the madman from achieving his goals and to clear a way for reinforcements. In all Strike games, you typically have 3 weapons: a small machine gun, Hydras, and Hellfires. Hydras are the medium missiles, and Hellfires are for your big-ticket targets. With each mission, you had multiple objectives. It's usually wise to complete each objective in order. A consequence of not doing so is entering an area where you're not supposed to be and encountering inhuman AAA or rapiers that are twice as powerful. Desert Strike featured 4 levels of play and is one of the more difficult games in the series. A common criticism of Desert Strike was in fact the difficulty. 3 lives weren't enough in many cases, and the fuel drum placements were poor. This encouraged the player to go through the level beforehand and identify where hidden ammo crates, drums, or repair kits were located. If you were low on armor, you could rescue personnel on the ground for 100 armor points each. Another complaint stated that too many enemies were appearing from buildings when you blew them up, but this is actually a simulation of what really happens in real life. You have to be careful and expect surprise attacks. The next game, Jungle Strike, extended the life of the series by offering about 9 levels of content. Through a password system, like through Desert Strike, it was possible to access different levels where a player discontinued play at an earlier time. For each game in the series, there was also a set of passwords that granted you extra lives, which made the difficulty drop. Jungle Strike featured many improvements over Desert Strike, including streamlined objectives, a slightly easier difficulty curve, and a more focused story. For the first time in the series, Jungle allowed you to enter another vehicle to finish the mission. The original vehicles in this game included a hovercraft, a motorcycle, and an F-117 Nighthawk. Each had their learning curve and offered a fun alternative to the staple chopper. The final 16-bit game in the series, Urban Strike, centered around events in the United States itself, as special forces attempted to stop the Madman's son from building a military empire. This game is also an example of the difference in processing power between the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. Play is smooth and fast in the Genesis version, with rapid fire being possible. The Super Nintendo version, however, which I'm more familiar with, is slower, laggier, and does not feature convenient rapid fire. The Super Nintendo version of the game is playable, although some will argue that it is not, but not as good as the Genesis title. Urban Strike introduced even more narrative into the game and allowed the player the opportunity for the first time to go on foot into an oil rig. This was a challenging mission in its own right and copied a hybrid of a grid system mixed with a shoot-'em-up. Codes are also available for this game, as the difficulty can be steep in later levels. The Strike series of games were very popular in the early 90s and were an innovator in the evolution of beat-em-up titles. If you like the genre, the Strike series is definitely worth picking up for your 16-bit console. If you have both a Super Nintendo and a Genesis, go for the Genesis copies. These games each receive my stamp of approval.